When you think about how a town is run, you probably picture a big city hall, right? But what about those small towns, maybe the ones with just a single stoplight? How do they actually work? Well, today we're going to pull back the curtain on the hidden networks that power these tiny communities. And trust me, what we find is pretty fascinating.
Okay, let's start with just one number, 76%. Take a second and just think, what could that possibly represent when we're talking about local government? The answer is, well, it's kind of huge. Get this, 76% is the number of municipalities in the entire United States with fewer than 5,000 people. Let that sink in for a minute. These small towns aren't some cute little exception to the rule. They are the rule. They're the basic building blocks of local government in America. And if you need a visual, here you go. This chart says it all. I mean, look at that first bar for towns under 5,000 people. It absolutely dwarfs everything else. It's not even close. So it makes you wonder, why are almost all of our ideas about government built for those tiny little bars way over on the right?
So, just so we're all on the same page, we're going to use a specific term for these places, micro-municipalities. That's the key phrase for these small but super important local governments we're digging into. And this brings us right to the heart of the problem. You can't just take the blueprint for a big city and expect it to work in these small, tight-knit communities. It's like trying to fit a square peg in a round hole.
I mean, just look at the difference. On one side, you have the big city model. It's all about hierarchy, bureaucracy, formal processes. And on the other side, that's the reality for a micro-municipality. Yeah, you've got close relationships, but you also have really limited resources and staff. You obviously can't just photocopy the big city plan, shrink it down, and hope for the best.
In fact, researchers actually have a name for this problem. They call it collaborative inertia. It's this idea that because the old models just don't fit, these towns kind of get stuck. They have a hard time working together, which means resources get wasted and they really struggle to tackle modern challenges.
So, if the old blueprint is broken, what's the solution? Well, the research we're looking at suggests a pretty radical shift in how we think about this. It says we need to stop seeing a small town as a tiny, broken-down version of a big city and start seeing it for what it really is, a complex and dynamic network. And this right here is the game-changing idea. We have to toss out that old-school top-down organizational chart. Governance in a small town isn't a pyramid. It's a web. It's a living, breathing system where power and influence flow between all kinds of different, interconnected people.
Which, of course, leads to the next big question, right? If it is a network, then who are the key players? And what are the rules, both the official ones and the unwritten ones, that decide how they all interact with each other?
Okay, so the research breaks it down for us. It identifies 4 key players, or what it calls nodes, in this small town network. Let's dig in and see who's really holding the power. All right, first up is society. Think of this as the big picture context. The media, political parties, that sort of thing. Then you zoom in a little to the stakeholders. These are groups with a direct interest, like local business owners or community nonprofits. Then, of course, you have the residents, the citizens themselves. And finally, you have the administrators, which is the formal government structure. But, just knowing who the players are is only half the story. The really interesting part is how they interact. The research points to 4 distinct flows of authority. Think of these as the channels that power and decisions move through. First, there's your classic command and control. That's old-school, top-down power. Next, you've got concession and compromise, which is basically the art of negotiation and bargaining. Then there's cooperation and collaboration. This one runs on mutual trust. And finally, you have competition, which usually kicks in when resources are scarce and everyone's trying to get their piece of the pie. Okay, so let's put all these pieces together. When we combine these 4 types of players with those 4 flows of authority, we get this really powerful new way of seeing how a small town actually operates. And boom, here it is. This diagram lays out the whole system beautifully. You can see the 4 nodes we talked about: the administration, stakeholders, residents, and society. And all those arrows connecting them, labeled with things like collaboration or competition, they show you exactly how influence moves between all these different groups. It's basically a living map of power in a small town. So what's the single biggest takeaway when you look at this map? It's that authority in a micro-municipality is not centralized. It's not all sitting in the mayor's office. It's distributed. Power is constantly flowing between the town hall, the local coffee shop owner, and the citizen who speaks up at a town meeting. Now, this isn't just some interesting theory for a research paper. Understanding this network model has huge real-world consequences. This new blueprint can actually show us how to build stronger, more effective, and more resilient small communities.
So, if you're a policymaker, what does this mean for you? The message is pretty clear. Embrace the network. That means you should be creating policies that are built for these close relationships, formally bringing those key stakeholders to the table, and most importantly, making it easier for residents to have a direct say in what happens in their town. And if you're a manager working on the ground in one of these towns, this model says you need to get out of your office. You have to actively engage with everyone, not just the people you always talk to, but the informal community leaders too. It's all about responsive leadership, listening to what the community actually needs and adapting instead of just sticking to a rigid, outdated plan. In the end, it really all boils down to this. This network model shows us that what these micro-municipalities need are flexible and inclusive strategies. They need an approach that's custom-built for them, one that plays to their unique strengths, like those strong community ties, instead of trying to jam them into a one-size-fits-all model that was never designed for them in the first place.
And that leaves us with one last thing for you to think about. Consider your own community, whether it's big or small. How might things change if the people in charge stopped thinking in terms of a rigid hierarchy and started seeing it as a dynamic, interconnected network of people and relationships? Just imagine what new possibilities that shift in perspective could unlock.